This is Sweetheart, Alabama, the podcast about the little herb shop in beautiful downtown Greenville, Alabama, where we discuss natural health you can do yourself, inspiring you to your own passion, and a little bit about the magic of living in the Camellia City. And now, here's your host, author, herbalist, and energy healer, Danan Wynn.
Hey, good morning. I hope you're doing great. This is Season 1, Episode 3 of Sweetheart, Alabama. Thanks, CJ, for that beautiful intro. Today we're going to talk about magnesium because everybody needs a little bit of magnesium, and I'm going to kind of simplify it for you. We're going to talk about the emotional sources of disease, and I'm going to tell you this story. I'm going to relay a story of what is considered the greatest prison break of a Union POW prison. And the person who orchestrated it and the first person out of that prison was a man from Greenville, Alabama. And it is a crazy story. I don't know why this isn't a movie already. Hey, I'm Danan. And I'm living my dream life in my hometown, Greenville, Alabama. I moved back home to open this tiny little herb shop called Sweetheart, Alabama. I also do energy healing, and I'm just living my best life, y'all. I know that sounds corny, but it's true, and it's from, just following my heart, finally.
Hey, wherever you're listening to Sweetheart, Alabama, leave a comment and let me know what you would like to hear on the show. I'm always trying to improve the podcast and love to get your feedback. Thanks.
Okay, so today I want to talk about magnesium, and the reason why is it's coming up a lot in the shop. It also is coming up a lot, you'll see it a lot on social media, and there's some things, I just want to simplify it for you and kind of get you thinking about the right way to think about magnesium, okay? First of all, it is essential. And you may be wondering about the different types of magnesium, and I don't worry about that as much as I want you to just get some magnesium in your system, but we're going to go over that. So, believe it or not, most people are magnesium deficient. Most people need a magnesium supplement. I tell people in the shop, if there's anything you can do to feel better right now, the first thing would be magnesium, really. Second thing would be a probiotic. Those are the two things that our modern lifestyle, that's what we require the most. So there's no really reliable test for magnesium levels because it doesn't stay in the bloodstream. So you can't go and get tested to see if you're magnesium deficient. But there's some ways to know if you may be magnesium deficient. Probably if you live in the modern world, you probably are. But some of the signs are leg cramps, restless leg, cramping in your leg, trouble when you're trying to sleep with your legs, mood swings, migraines. One of the most interesting things I see with magnesium deficiency in young girls is around age 9 or 10, they'll develop a tic. And I see it a lot where people will, and this is where it frustrates me as an herbalist and somebody who has a shop and knows that there's not an easy answer for everything, but sometimes there is. And people will notice that their preteen daughters will develop a little bit of a verbal tic, like a click or an eye wink or just something that seems like they're developing a tic, right? And they'll be concerned enough to go to a doctor. And I'm not saying most doctors won't say, hey, maybe it's a magnesium deficiency. All I'm saying is sometimes they'll go through neurological tests and get on prescription medications, and really it's just a magnesium deficiency. And so I see that a lot happening, and I'm glad when people come to talk to me first because I'd rather they try magnesium first before they do something extreme. Don't go chasing zebras when it's really just horses in the yard, right? If you are on prescription medication, you're probably magnesium deficient because prescriptions leach magnesium out of your body. Yeah. So when you are including a magnesium supplement, like I said before, I'd really just want you to take some magnesium. But because of social media, there are different types to consider. Let me go over just the easiest way to understand this. So magnesium oxide, sometimes that's the easiest to find. It's the least expensive. But depending on where it's sourced, it can be very difficult for the body to absorb. So you can get a cheap, badly sourced magnesium oxide, and it's not going to do you a bit of good. But there are really good magnesium oxides. I actually carry one that's sourced from the Dead Sea, and it is organic, and it really is easily absorbed in the body. And so then this type might be good to prevent migraines, and that's why I have it in my brain section. Magnesium citrate helps with constipation. It has a calming effect. And then magnesium threonate has been used to improve overall brain function and memory. So, like I say, just get some magnesium in your system first. See if that makes you feel better, and then you can go into getting specifics on your magnesium.
To find out more about the shop, Sweetheart Alabama, go to our website at sweetheartalabama.com. You can also find out what goes on behind the scenes on our TikTok page, which is Sweetheart Alabama.
Alrighty, and y'all know, look, let me just give you a little inside info, okay, on this TikTok thing. I never intended to do TikTok. Over COVID, a young lady who comes by the shop was like, get a TikTok, you've got to do TikTok, we'll do dances together. And she was, obviously not in school and very bored. And she talked me into it, and I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. We made a couple of TikToks, and it blew up. And almost immediately, people started ordering supplements from different states, and I thought, okay, there's something to this, and the TikTok is just hilarious because it has grown almost beyond my capabilities to understand in my small brain what it is and how it works, and it's just a crazy thing. But yeah, with almost 80,000 followers now, it's an over 10 million views on TikToks. That's the power of social media, man. A little tiny shop like Sweetheart Alabama can connect with that many people. It's pretty amazing. All right, so let me talk about energy healing. Like, this is one of the things that I really want to share with you because I don't think a lot of people understand it. It's not crazy woo-woo. It's just an alternative way of thinking about how our bodies work and how we're all connected and how energy affects us and how our bodies can heal themselves. So I've been trying to introduce everybody to the way that I do energy healing myself. My actual training is in Usui Reiki. And today I want to share some of the ideas of the emotional sources of disease as taught by traditional Reiki trainers. Now, this is not always the case, okay? But if any of this does hit home with you, talk to me, contact me. If you're interested in getting your own energy healing session, you can do that remotely from me. We can talk about all of this more and about ways that energy healing helps to release and balance these issues and help your body heal itself. All right, so arthritis. An emotional base for arthritis is perfectionism and patterns of criticism. For constipation, it's inability to let go and a lack of trust. Feet issues, and look, I'm skipping around, okay? Feet issues, self-understanding and difficulty moving forward. Knee issues, pride, stubbornness, and fear of change. Neck issues are a flexibility issue. If you sometimes, now look, this is not always, but sometimes overweight issues is a need for protection. Stomach issues is fear, holding in fear. Throat issues is fear of change, anger, and frustration. Ulcers is fear of not being good enough. And sometimes we get to the bottom of that and sometimes we don't. It's important to know that there are physical and non-physical sources of diseases. To totally heal any issue, though, all the causes must be addressed. So for me, that's where natural healing and energy healing all work together. Energy healers do not attach judgments to any of this because, look, there are ways that God works in our lives that are beyond all of our understanding. What energy healers are here to do, though, is to support and assist people in their journey, not work against it, okay? Whew.
If you'd like to find out more about the benefits of energy healing, go to dananwhitten.com.
All right, y'all. This is going to be, please bear with me when I tell this crazy story. I've been wanting to share this with y'all for a while, and it gets a little complicated, so I'm going to paraphrase it, and I'm going to tell you directly from this man's own mouth what happened in 1864. This is a Greenville man, and his name was Washington Brown Trawick, and his escape from the Elmira prison camp in New York. So this information, by the way, is printed in the April 2021 quarterly by the Butler County Historical and Genealogical Society, and the information was compiled by Martha Grimes Lampkin. Also, if you're interested, you may not even be interested in your local history wherever you live, but I'm going to tell you, historical societies typically save these amazing stories of the people who came before us in our communities, and some of them are just absolutely shocking. I don't think we realize what life was like 100, 200, 300 years ago, and the bravery that it took to live back then. So let me tell you about Washington Trawick. First of all, he was born in 1845 in Butler County. He was attending school when war broke out. He was attending the Methodist Episcopal Church South, and I believe that was in Selma. So at the age of 16, he enlists in the Confederate Army back in Selma. He ends up going on to fight in Sharpsburg, Gettysburg, and Spotsylvania. So this man he's in all the crazy places during the Civil War. Places where a lot of people were killed. So he was taken prisoner actually in Spotsylvania on May 12th, 1864. So he's still 16 or 17 years old. That's it. Can you imagine? He's a teenager. So he and 9 other people managed to escape from this prison camp, okay? And I'm going to tell you his story, but kind of at the end tell you what happened to the rest of them. The man that he escapes with, like I said, there's 9 other people, but he has a buddy. You know, they buddy up in pairs of 2 and then go their separate ways. And his buddy is James W. Crawford, who was from Virginia. So Elmira Prison is just north of the Pennsylvania border in western New York State. The camp, it was bad. It was not ready to handle even the 5,000 people it was built for. It actually held 12,000, and so you can imagine there wasn't a hospital there. They didn't have kitchen space. There was what they called a stagnant lagoon named Foster's Pond, and they called it a symbol of death. It was a haven for mosquitoes and rats, and where, listen, they poured as many as 2,000 gallons of urine in that a day, so you can imagine. So the well water in the area was quickly contaminated. There was no clean water. Gross. The fence around this camp was 12 feet high, and there were sentries with guns pointed. So what did these guys to do? They're going to dig a tunnel. This is like Shawshank Redemption, y'all. It's so much like Shawshank Redemption. It's crazy. Here's from the report. The civilians couldn't help but be a little curious about the prisoners, and it didn't take long for someone to capitalize on it. A tower was set up across the street, and for 15 cents you could climb to the top, take a seat with some peanuts and lemonade, and watch the prisoners. The prisoners started to realize they were watched and began putting on shows, and then the guards put a stop to their antics. But yeah, I mean, if you had a POW camp in your town, you might be tempted to take some popcorn and lemonade and watch them. I mean, so the prisoners ate twice a day while standing at chest-high tables. They were given 15 minutes to devour, as one inmate noted, a small piece of bread and a small piece of salt pork. And in the afternoon, a small piece of bread and a tin plate of soup. The soup was a mix of onions, roots, dirt, and sometimes a few beans. Here, stray dogs and cats were fair game for food, as well as rats. Dead rats were sold for 5 cents apiece and were said to taste like squirrel. The prisoners received no fruits or vegetables. So, of course, with this kind of food and, the sewer systems non-existent, there was extreme diarrhea, typhoid, pneumonia, smallpox, scurvy. There's no doctors, no medicine. And so many, many prisoners died. In fact, Elmira prison camp held about 12,000 prisoners, and at least 3,000 of those died. So, yeah. But here's what happened. A lot of the prisoners had tried to tunnel out and escape. In fact, I believe there were over 10 tunnels discovered. But the tunnel that our guy built with his 9 other friends is the only tunnel they never found. So a lot of this is just sheer luck. So I'm going to tell you some of Trawick's story in his own words, okay? So around the 1st of July, he is being transported by train to the prison camp. He says, "We were placed in boxcars with 3 sentinels at each door. About 11 o'clock that night, it being very dark, Zeke Melton tapped me on the shoulder and said, 'Wash, let's go.' I said to him that it was impossible then. The train was going about 40 miles an hour, and I told him to look at the guards. He took me by the hand, bid me goodbye, and said, 'Watch me.' As I turned, he squared himself and rushed through the door, knocking 2 of the guards off into the darkness, and made his escape. The train had gone nearly 50 yards before it could be stopped, and when it backed to the place of escape, no one was found but one crippled guard. Melton made his escape and went back to his company. A few days after reaching the prison at Elmira, Sergeant John Fox Mall, John P. Pugnant, and I, all of whom were members of the Jeff Davis Artillery, held a consultation and determined to dig a tunnel from the second row of tents on the north side to the prison next to the city streets. So they decided they're going to do it. So to prosecute our work, it was necessary to know the distance from the tent to the wall. To ascertain this without arousing suspicion off the guard, whose beat was 12 feet inside the wall, we threw stones at the wall, apparently as a pastime. After watching us for 3 hours, the guard became careless, and we attached a stone to a thread and threw the stone to the wall. It was then drawn to the tind, and the thread measured when the distance to be tunneled was found to be 68 feet. So, sorry, I stumbled there a little bit. So, what they did is they were trying to figure out how far it was they were going to have to tunnel so they would know when they were underground how far they had tunneled to get under the wall. And 68 feet is what they've determined to do. So, I can't even imagine thinking about that's ahead of me, you know. So here's the crazy part. They take turns digging this tunnel. Now, what are they going to do with the dirt? Much like Shawshank Redemption, they are putting dirt in their pockets. And when they go out in the yard during the day, they are releasing the dirt out of their pockets slowly. Then they notice, wait a minute, our clothes are getting a little too dirty, a little too muddy here. So they realize that when they go in to secretly dig a little bit out of the tunnel, that they need to put their clothes on inside out. So they're putting on their clothes inside out, they're digging a little bit, putting the dirt in their pockets, going out during the day and releasing that dirt painstakingly. So Trawick decides also, let's build a second tunnel just in case, right? Well, he gets busted digging out this second tunnel. And when he gets called in, the Commander Colt says, "Good morning, my young tunneler. They tell me you're engaged in tunneling." To which he said, I replied I didn't know what a tunnel was. He replied by stating, "We have a way here of making you know what a tunnel is." So he does get tortured. Major Colt ordered me to a sweatbox. I was placed in it, and the crank turned on me and had my breath squeezed out. They claimed to have kept me there 3/4 of a minute, but it seemed to me to be 3 hours and a half. After I got my breath, Major Colt said, now you have to state where you were tunneling and who was with you." I still told him I didn't know. And he ordered me back to the sweatbox and carried me through the same process. After the second time, I saw it was my death anyway, and pointing my finger at Colt, I told him that I would see him in hell as far as a bluebird could fly in a year before I'd tell him, and that I would rather he would kill me. That he and his comrades were too damn cowardly to do it, though. He ordered his guards to come around, which they did, and I told him that no brave soldier would treat a man as he had me, with my hands behind my back. At this time, Fox Maul pushed me 2 or 3 times and showed me his pocket knife in his sleeve. At about the same instant, a man came up who was afterward known to me as Captain Bennet Munger, the officer of the day, and said, "Major Colt, I know this boy, and if you will turn him over to me, he will tell me all about this tunneling." Major Colt replied, "All right, Captain, but he is a sassy son of a bitch and ought to be shot." So who is this Captain Munger? Well, let's continue. He took me to the front of the federal tents and said to me, "Wash, they have you, and you might as well tell it all." And I said to him, "Who are you?" And he responded saying, "I'm Captain Munger, the officer of the day here, and I heard you lie to Colt about that tunnel, saying you didn't know what a tunnel was, and I know that you do know what a tunnel is, because you went to school with me. You remember me. I taught school at Summerfield near Selma, Alabama, before this war began." And I said, "Thank you, Captain Munger. I know who you are, and I thank you for your kind intercession, but I do not know what tunnel you are talking about." Well, then Munger tells him, "Hey, we know about this tunnel. It's the second tunnel, y'all, not the original." So he's like, "Oh, yeah, the second tunnel. Or that tunnel, yeah, I thought we were digging a ditch." Like he plays dumb the whole time. So he gets put into this solitary confinement situation with this other guy named Crawford. This is the guy that he's going to escape with, right? And while they're getting their rations, they have a guy helping them pass notes to the other, original tunnelers, and kind of keeping track with each other. And they're passing notes in the bread. So he'd write a little note and he would put it inside the bread and give it back to the guard who was passing notes back and forth, helping him out. So Crawford, his cellmate, is like, hey, I want in on this tunneling thing. And he does this really interesting thing, y'all. He asks the guard, I need a Bible. And the guard's like, why do you don't need a Bible in here. It's dark. You can't read it. There's no reason you would use a Bible in here. And he says, I'm a Christian man, and it would just feel better if I had a Bible to lay my head on at night. And the guard feels sorry for him and says, all right, I'll try to find you a Bible. So he finds he finds Trawick a Bible. And Trawick uses that Bible to make Crawford swear on the Bible that he won't tell anyone about the tunneling. And that's when he tells Crawford, okay, you're in. You can be part of the tunneling club. So after some more days of being in confinement, he goes and he apologizes to the head of the prison camp. And Crawford goes with him, and they promise they'll be good boys. And the head of the prison camp, it's like, what's the harm? We found all the tunnels. Let's let these guys back into general population. And so they discover at that point there's only a few more days of digging before they're out, before they're going to reach the end. And they do. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a highlights of this daring escape and the journey back home. Trawick and his friend Crawford are the first people out of the tunnel. So on the first day, they travel about a mile. And, they're traveling at night. They're traveling in the woods. They're trying to find ways to travel quicker, which means they steal horses and wagons, buggies. So they stole a boat, floated down a river about 75 miles. They're camping in the woods. This is days and days. At some point, they had found a horse and a buggy, harnessed it, drove it. They drove the buggy until the horse gave out. And they consistently will ride horses and leave horses and buggies right where they are too tired to go on. Now, my hope is that these horses are rescued at some point, but they steal an awful lot of horses and buggies to get back home. At one point, they were harnessing a horse, and Crawford was attacked by a bulldog, which tore off the entire tail of his overcoat. He says, we went on down the road on foot, and I laughed at Crawford until he got mad at me. Okay, then, from his story, we had gone some distance and still did not find anything else to ride, but just after the point of discouragement, we came upon a hut where we found a horse tied to a tree. We mounted this horse and rode about 2 or 3 miles when we met 2 old citizens who asked, what in the name of God are you boys doing with old Blaze? I replied, Blaze, hell, you get out of the way. And at that same moment pointed my old pepper box pistol at them. So they had stole a couple of pistols from some houses at that point. They took to their heels. After proceeding about half a mile, the old men called from our rear, and at the same time we were ordered by federal guards to halt. We jumped off Old Blaze and ran across the small stream, wading over to a railroad crossing. As we ran, they fired and killed Old Blaze. We went into the mountains, built a fire, dried our clothes, and remained there for the night. Just so sad. So for several other days, they would come in contact with people, not meaning to, and be shot at. They were shot at, I think, at least 3-4 more times. At one point, Trawick fell over a sleeping Yankee, as he describes it. And they actually had found themselves, quite by accident, inside of a Yankee camp. And so snuck around that night and stole 2 pistols and then hightailed it out of there. Finally, they came to a canal where boats were passing, and they decided we've got to swim this. But here's the problem. Crawford can't swim. So Trawick gets across this canal. But the Yankee soldiers see Crawford splashing around because he doesn't know how to swim, and they think he's a man overboard. So Trawick has to pretend and get him out of the canal. And finally, they make their way through. It's cold. By the time they are getting close to the southern area, right? So here's where they finally know that they're going to make it. This is just incredible. So they go to a man's house, and they finally realize that this man is a sympathizer, and he says, "Come on, boys." Now, they're wet and they're cold from having swum or almost drowned across the canal. And this man, Jenkins, lets them in the house in front of a big fire in his house, and hands them a bottle of brandy. And Trawick says, "In 15 minutes, I had another $75 cloth suit, which was presented to me by one of the young ladies, Miss Jenkins, stating that it belonged to a brother of hers, a captain in the Confederate Army who had been killed, and that she was satisfied for me to wear it. They also gave Crawford a suit of clothes. Then two of Mosby's men came in, and we joined them, and succeeded in getting to Winchester, Virginia, our main Confederate lines. Here Crawford and I separated. He went to his Virginia home, and I to Greenville, Alabama." Wow. So, okay, this should be, I left out some of the details of the stealing of horses and being fired upon. It took many days for them to escape. It took Crawford an extra 23 days to get back home to Virginia. And here's what's interesting. Trawick eventually sent a letter back to Major Colt, thanking him for his kind care and attention while stopping at his hotel in Elmira, just to put salt in that wound. 9 of the 10 men who originally escaped made their way back to the South. Glenn Shelton escaped but was never heard from again, so we don't know if he died or what happened to him. But for decades after the war, they were celebrated in their respective communities as heroes. There is good reason to celebrate, for their remarkable achievements is considered to be the most spectacular escape in the annals of prison escapes. So, yeah. I wonder if any of this might have been inspiration for Shawshank Redemption, really. So here's what's great about Washington Trawick of Greenville, Alabama. He went through the entire Civil War without ever receiving a wound. He had several horses shot out from under him, and men fell on all sides of him, but he never even received a scratch. Went on to live a life of a couple of wives, plenty of children. He died in Biloxi, Mississippi in 1923. So there is this is the heroism of a kid from Greenville, Alabama, when he was 16 and 17 years old. I can't imagine, y'all. And so apologies for stumbling while telling you this story. I wanted to make sure I got the facts right, but it's so crazy. It's hard. It's a hard story to tell because it is so crazy the way it happened. I've got some really interesting stories coming up thanks to the Historical Society here in Greenville, Alabama. I thank you for being patient with me today because I know I stumbled a bit, but I just really wanted to get that story out there. I don't want it to be lost to history, So today we talked about the wonders of magnesium and why we all need it. Some emotional ties to disease, and this daring prison escape that it really should be a movie. I'd love to hear from you. If you would reach out to our social media and let me know how you would like me to change up this podcast or do a better job at it somehow. If there's anything you would like me to answer as far as herbal health, energy healing goes, I would love to do that for you, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Sweetheart, Alabama. To learn more about the show or about Danan, please visit sweetheartalabama.com or dananwhitten.com. This is CJ Clark speaking. You can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at CJ Clark 81. This has been Sweetheart, Alabama.